Hey friends, so I know that you, just like me, get a lot of emails and messages and all kinds of things throughout the week that you have to pay attention to. And here I am making a video that I am sending your way. But with all of the sincerity that I can muster, I'm going to ask you that you would buckle in and you would watch this whole video because I have something really, really important to share with you for the future of our church. And I really need you to lean in. So let me tell you a bit of a story, bring you up to speed on something, and tell you what we elders are looking at. Last year, we had our budget meeting, like we do every year, and we talk about what's happened this year financially and what we're planning to do next year. And we cast some vision and put out a packet of looking ahead and looking back and looking at all the numbers. One of the things we talked about last year was hiring a third full-time person. Now, we were talking about that because our seed youth is growing significantly. In fact, in the next few years, we're going to have several students every year aging out of the seedlings ministry, coming up into seed youth, and the number of families and students in that ministry is going to grow exponentially. And on top of that, even beyond that ministry, the whole church is growing. Maybe you guys have noticed this on some Sundays, that we've had some very full Sundays here in this building. And so last year, as we were talking about hiring this third full-time person, we asked you as the church, if you were members especially, we wanted you to vote and to help us elders know, what do you think about this? Do you think it's time, and do you think it's wise to hire that third full-time person? Now, ultimately, when the vote came in, the vast majority of members said, you know what? God has walked us through these last 11 years. He's always taken care of us. And, we're growing and we need more direction. And so let's run at it and trust that the Lord is going to provide. But we did get a very important question from more than one person. And here's basically how the question went. Okay, Ryan, suppose you get the right person. It's the perfect fit. It's the great third full-time guy to work alongside you and Pastor Mark for the future of the church, alongside the elders and all the other wonderful leaders and staff people we have at the church. Suppose you get the right guy. And ministry continues to grow. And there are more baptisms. And more people get invited to the church. And gospel ministry is flourishing. And the church is growing. And the question went like this. Let's say that happens. Where are we going to put people? We're already growing. Some Sundays are really full. Where are we going to put people? And on top of that, if we hire this guy, can we grow enough in our current space to long-term afford that third full-time guy? And here was our honest answer. We don't know. We don't know. We're just trying to trust the Lord and listen and build plans and use the best wisdom we can. And so we had all those conversations. Now, last December, about middle of December, a pastor in town called me. And this guy is planting a church in a larger building. And he called me and just said, hey, would you like to maybe explore you guys as a church potentially taking our building and us taking your building? And so this last December began a process that we elders and some other leaders and staff people and people that we've intentionally invited in to look at this and talk about it the last 5 months or whatever it's been since mid-December, we've been looking at this and processing this. And it's now getting to a point that it's time to bring all of you in on the conversation. We are looking at a new church campus for the Seed Church. And it's for some of the reasons I've already listed, that the church is growing and kids are getting older. And every time kids age out of seedlings, they take up new seats here in the auditorium. And every time a new family gets invited who plugs into the church and baptisms and just what the Lord has done. This is His glory. This is His work. This is His church. And we elders are just trying to steward it the best that we can. And so, friends, we elders thought, okay, maybe where the Lord is leading us, the next big step for our church is finding that right staff person. That's the next step. But after getting that phone call in mid-December, and us looking at this very carefully and wisely and slowly alongside Isaac, who's our church treasurer, been helping us, Isaac Ulbrich, making sense of things from a stewardship standpoint, we elders strongly sense that this next step is not immediately the third full-time person, but more space. So in the coming days, maybe a bit more than a few days, maybe a week or so, we want to get to you a prospectus. And by prospectus, I mean something we'll make available online that all of you can access on your phone or computer that's going to provide some data and some clarity on what we've been looking at the last 5 months. And in addition to that prospectus, we then want to schedule some walkthroughs where we can invite you to come to this new potential church campus and to walk through it and to ask questions and to understand and just begin a process for us to move toward intentionally seeking God's face on, Lord, is the future of our local church in a different space. So that's what this video is all about. And I realize at this point, you probably have way more questions than this has provided answers. But that's intentional. That's intentional. Because that prospectus is going to give you the data to look at. Here's what I want this video to do. This is what I've been praying about, thinking for days and days on making this and sending this to you. I want you to think about this in 2 ditches. And by ditches, I mean things that we want to avoid. And I'm going to tap into some Old Testament history for just a moment here. In the Old Testament, the first king of Israel, his name was Saul. Saul was the first king. And when David came on the scene, you may remember that David slayed Goliath. And because of that, Saul was very jealous. And Saul got radically caught up in his own reputation, the size of his kingdom, the reputation of him as a king, and what people thought about him, and his own vision of success, and all this stuff. And Saul was just so wrapped up in himself and what it's going to be like. And friends, that is a ditch that every local church must avoid. This is God's church. It's God's kingdom. It's God's work. We don't compare ourselves to other churches, just like we don't compare ourselves to other people. It's all about God's glory. And the Bible shows us again and again and again that when churches get too wrapped up in things like the space that we're in, or the size of our church, or the significance of what God is doing, they get too wrapped up in that, bad things happen. So I want to be clear, our elders' goal is not some vision that we've cracked up for what the seed needs to be. Our goal is to follow Jesus and obey God. And so when we got this phone call in mid-December, our response was, okay, God, let's walk it out. Let's see what you show us. Here's the second ditch to avoid. In the Old Testament, in the first 5 books of the Bible, that's called the Pentateuch, the first 5 books, you can read about Moses and how God called him to free God's people from slavery in Egypt. And they went out into the wilderness. And you see, they came up to the edge of this promised land that God was giving them. He was going to give them this new land to live in. But they came to the edge, and they sent in 12 spies to look at the land and make sense of it and to bring back a report. Those 12 spies came back, and 10 of them said, we can't do this. It's too much. The giants are too big. The work is too big. We can't do it. But there were 2 spies who were listening to God. Their names were Joshua and Caleb. And they said, guys, listen, God has brought us here. He's brought us to the edge of this. And he has promised to see us through. And so we're going to have to walk in faith here. We got to walk in clear faith. And maybe it looks like this doesn't make sense, but if God is taking us here, then we got to walk it. And as you may know, God's people did not listen to the 2, but they listened to the 10. And then God's people received a 40-year curse of wandering in the wilderness for not trusting the Lord. Friends, that's the 2 ditches that we need to avoid. This is not about us. It's not about our reputation. It's not about what we think our church ought to be. We want to follow God. At the same time, as we explore this together, if we really sense, man, God is in this, then our response is trust and faith. And so that's what I and the other elders want to lead you in for this season. So friends, look out for that prospectus that will give you some data information. It won't be next week, sometime likely the week after. We'll keep you in tune with scheduling some walkthroughs for you to look at this building, to ask questions, and for us to walk this out together. Listen, if there's one thing I could ask of you, and just sincerely ask of you, be in prayer. Pray. Pray for our church. Pray for God's will to be done. Pray for gospel ministry to continue surging in our church. Regardless of where we're meeting or what those details look like, we're called to be the hands and feet of Jesus Christ. And friends, we have done that in mobile locations for years. I mean, we did that for 6 years before we even had a building. And then we put away the trailer and all the setup and tear down. And we moved in this building we're currently in. And we've been trusting and following God for over 4 years here now. And now we're asking the Lord, based on things He's brought to us, God, is it time to take apart the tabernacle and to move somewhere else where your Spirit is leading? Brothers and sisters, thank you for taking the time to watch this. Be in prayer. We'll be leading you in the coming days. Love you.